What's going on YouTube? John Conrad here from Drone One Media, and today's video is all about cinematic color correction. And I did a color correction video last year that was very popular, and I had a lot of requests to do more videos, so I'm doing another color correction video. I will have that first video linked as well as a playlist linked down below for all of my color correction videos that I've done. And this video is going to focus in on color grading your drone footage to make it look more cinematic and have a wider dynamic range, and to showcase the footage as best as you possibly can and to make it look more cinematic. And before we jump into it, I want to say thank you so much to everybody who has supported me so far. Up over 3,000 subscribers now, which is crazy. I never thought I'd be anywhere near that. So thank you so much to everybody that has supported me so far. And if you like the video, make sure to give it a big thumbs up. And if you're new here, hit that subscribe button so you never miss any upcoming videos. And without further ado, let's jump into it. So when we fly our drones, we all want to see footage like this, where it's beautiful, it's color graded properly. You have a nice wide spread between the reds and the yellows and the blues and the turquoise colors. But as you can see here, this is what the footage looks like in DCINELIKE, which is how I shot this. DCINELIKE with -2, -2, and -2 in the color profile settings. So that's what I shot this in. It's not quite as flat as DLOG, but at the time when I was shooting this, I couldn't really get the DLOG to work on the Phantom 4 Pro. They have since updated the firmware, and now it locks the ISO at 500, which I have been playing with that a little bit. I should have a video up on that soon as well, so stay tuned for that. Let's jump out of the full screen view, and I will walk you through exactly how I got from this to this. And it's really a lot simpler than you might think. So first off, I want to grab a base grade, and it's going to be in the titles and generators menu. And you grab base grade and drag it down here right on top of the clip, extend it to the same length. And I'm going to be using Color Finale to show you guys the color correction today. That's what I have transitioned into using. I started off using just the standard color correction that's baked into Final Cut Pro, but found that Color Finale suits my needs better. So now I'm going to add Color Finale onto the top of this. You can either drag and drop, or you can double click. Either one works just fine. So it brings up the Color Finale Pro inside the inspector. Go ahead and open the controls, and then I want to bring up my color workspace. So I go down Window, down to Workspaces, Color and Effects, and that brings up the color tools. I only want to see one element at a time. I find that when you have all of them on the screen, at least on this 15-inch screen, it doesn't work that well because you can't really see any of them that well, and I find myself squinting. So then I want to start with RGB overlay. And RGB overlay shows all the red, blue, and green, the RGB, or red, green, and blue, excuse me, overlaid on top of each other. So you can see where the shadows are down here and the highlights up here. So you can see the contrast between the shadows, the midtones, and the highlights. And you can see it's pretty flat. You know, the highlights don't go to 100 and the shadows don't go to 0, which is great because I shot in DCINELIKE to shoot a very flat image that I could manipulate in post-production. So first of all, we're going to go bring up the color wheels, similar to what you might find in the standard color correcting tool in Final Cut Pro. You can adjust the shadows on the left here, the gamma or the midtones, and on the right, you can adjust the highlights. So I will start with the shadows, pull them down to about there, pull up the highlights to about there, and I just kind of play with the gamma until I am satisfied with it right about there. And next, I'm going to boost the saturation to give it some life. Right about there, starting to look very nice. So just with that correction, you can see the difference. Looking pretty nice already, but kind of just getting started here. There are a few more advanced steps that I think make the footage look a lot better, and I'll show those to you now. First up, let's bring up a curves layer, and keep in mind on Color Finale, these elements build on top of each other, so you can add as many curves layers, you can add vector tools, LUT utility, you can add all of these on top of each other, and you can actually dial in each layer, with the opacity tool down at the bottom. And it's really easy with Color Finale because of all these tools and the flexibility you have to really get the look that you set out to achieve. I'm going to go ahead and delete the extra ones here, go back to just my single curves layer here, and I want to start off with the master curve, and I want to put a point right in the middle, and I'm going to put a point down here in the shadows and pull that down. I don't want to crush the blacks too much, but that's nice because it gives you some contrast over here and some more contrast in the water. On the red curve, what I'm going to do is I'm going to pull down, similar to what I did on the master curve, pull down on the red curve, which this introduces teal into the image, which brings out more color in the water, which looks great. And then since I did that in the shadows, to balance the color of the image, I'm going to go to the highlights, grab in the middle here and push that up to introduce some orange into the highlights. So just with the curves added, you can see it's already building upon the color wheels layer and adding just more contrast and making it look that much better. So from here, I'm going to add a vector scope, or the 6 vector tool, and I'm going to bring up the vector scope. And what the vector scope is it basically gives you a bird's eye view of the footage and of this frame. So it's telling you where the colors are at in the color spectrum, and you can see the cyan and the blue here, which represents obviously the water, and you can see a little bit of green, which is represented over here, and the yellow and the red, which is everything else. To achieve a more cinematic look, you want to have more contrast between the yellows and the reds and the blues and the teals, because this gives more separation between these colors. These colors are opposite of each other on the color wheel, so they complement each other very nicely. So it's aesthetically pleasing and makes your image just look that much better. So in order to get the max dynamic range between the yellows and the reds and the cyans and the blues, we're going to use the 6 vector tool. And starting off with the red, you can see when we play with the hue, you see that little red on the top moving, so you can actually change the hue of each color, and basically you want it to be straight across from, or as close to straight across as you can get from the blues and the cyans. And we're going to bring the saturation all the way up on that. There's not a whole lot of red in the image, but any red that is there, I would like to, so you get more color to the image. And I'm going to bring the luminosity down just a little bit there. Next up is going to be yellow. And yellow, so you can see when I change the hue, changes that there. I'm going to keep the yellow right about there. Boost up the saturation and bring down the luminosity. And keep in mind, when you're using the 6 vector or any of the tools in Color Finale, you can always dial back the opacity. So if you find that a look is too strong, you can always dial it back to taste. So when you are color correcting initially, I always go for a stronger look that I can then dial back if I choose to. And so next up is blue, and you can see it's moving this part right over here. So I want there to be a nice spread between the teal and the blue, so you can see the darker colors over here. And I want as much contrast there as I can. So I want to keep these spread out. And dial up the saturation. Dial back the luminosity. And then for the teal, I think right about there on the hue looks good. Pull up the saturation. I'm actually going to turn up the luminosity a little bit, just because you get a nice bright teal color, and then you get the contrast with the darker blue color, which looks really nice. And let me see if I need to dial this back at all. I think that's pretty good. Okay, so let's go back and look at what we've done. And that looks pretty good. So let's take a look at the first one and see how different it looks. Pretty similar. Okay, so I had done this earlier. I think the hue's a little different on the blue. Okay, so there you can see the vector scope on the first clip, the one that I had color corrected prior, and then you can see the vector scope on the new one, so they look pretty much identical. And so that's really it. I mean, it's a pretty quick process to make your footage look more cinematic. So let's see, before and after. So you can see a big difference between the DCINELIKE footage and the color graded footage, and it looks much more cinematic, and that's what we're all trying to achieve when we go out there and fly our drones. So if you like more flexibility in post, make sure you color correct in DLOG or DCINELIKE and drop down the saturation, the contrast, and the sharpness in the image by either 1 or 2. Everybody has a little different opinion on that, but I've used both -1 across the board and -2, and I find that they both work just fine. So hope you liked the video. If you did, make sure to give it a big thumbs up. It really helps me out a lot. And if you're new here, make sure to hit that subscribe button to never miss any upcoming videos. I'm John Conrad from Drone One Media. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll catch you in the next video.